today's workshop. We're going to talk for about an hour, maybe a little bit more, and then there's refreshments next door for those who can stay. We start off by just introducing ourselves and what we're keen to do today. So firstly, my name is David Hunt. I work for a company that specialises in analysis of various energy issues. I've worked in the energy industry for the last too many years. I won't tell you how many. In both the oil and gas and in the renewable side of things. With me today, I've got two colleagues, Frank Gagan over here and Rachel Holden. We've also got two other people that I'll introduce today who will also speak briefly in a moment, Giacomo Calepi and Jonathan Young. Without further ado, if we just get the technology to work, the clicker. Right. So we'll talk in a moment about what the study that we're engaged in is all about, what we're keen to get from you. We'll talk about what the offshore wind opportunity means for South Taranaki and New Zealand. We're keen particularly to talk about a survey that we can get you to do. You will be, as you're sitting here, getting an email about the survey, and then we're very happy to take questions. Mainly, happy probably to take questions as we go, unless we're starting to run out of time, in which case we might park them and try and deal with them next door over a sausage roll. I'll just give you a quick overview of what this study is all about. So, as lots of you will know, there is a lot of talk about whether and when an offshore wind industry will develop in Taranaki. We'll talk about that in a moment. Two of the parties that are pursuing that, Copenhagen Offshore Partners and New Zealand Super, who have sponsored this study together with NZTE and supported by Araaki, have asked us to do a study as to what is the opportunity in concrete terms, not arm waving, what actually does it mean in terms of jobs and opportunities for suppliers. So we've done a lot of work on that. And then what we want to do is to figure out, well, actually, given those opportunities, what readiness is there within the area to actually match those opportunities? And bearing in mind we're talking about an industry that's a little bit down the track, what can you do to actually prepare for those opportunities as well? We're at the stage where we really want to gather information from you, so we'll talk about that in a moment. That's the survey. And the results of all of this will be written up, it'll be a report that's published, and we'll also be handing over a database of potential providers to the sponsors of the study. So if I'll just hand over and let Giacomo say a few words.
David? Yeah, and kia ora koutou. Hello Mike, welcome. Just a couple of words and then I'll shut up because I speak too much normally at these things. I'm here representing the Taranaki Offshore Partnership. So as David said, it's a joint venture of New Zealand Super Fund, which I think most of you probably know, and Copenhagen Infrastructure Partners. A bit of information there on the brochures that you have on the tables. CIP, Copenhagen Infrastructure Partners, large renewable energy investment fund. We build offshore wind farms all over the world, so we have a lot of experience in this, and New Zealand kind of showed up on the map, say a couple of years ago slightly, or something like that. And South Taranaki, definitely the spot, the prime position in New Zealand for developing offshore wind, mainly because of shallow water depths and amazing wind conditions, as you probably all know. So we're looking at the feasibility at this stage. We're still in a feasibility stage, so understanding if it's possible, if it's the right thing for New Zealand to have offshore wind in this location. A lot of work that needs to happen, as you can imagine, a lot of work in the environmental side, understanding what the impacts would be, understanding what the impacts on the communities would be and all that. A lot of work with iwi, as you can imagine as well. A lot of work with government. So we have a lot of work in every possible field. But one especially important aspect that we want to investigate early on, and we are years away from potentially building this, but this is the right time to start talking about jobs and what the local opportunities are. So, down the track, there will be a lot of jobs that if we don't do anything now, today, they will have to go overseas. There will have to be overseas contractors that come in. But we are sort of early enough in the piece that we can actually start seeing who locally can fill some of these positions, and we can start talking about that. We can start training up people who might not quite be ready for some of the skills. So there's a real opportunity here to start preparing this sort of the ground for what will come in the future. And that was the idea behind this whole study. So Concept Consulting are doing a great job with this. We're very happy. It's been running for almost a year now. There was an initial phase of, I guess, gathering information on what kind of jobs come with offshore wind, discussing them, and this is, I would say, one of the final phases where we want to hear from you, as David said, on what are your skills, what are you ready to bring, what would you like to bring, and how can we help you deliver those that help. So I will now shut up and give it back to David. Thanks.
Tēnā koutou everybody, Jonathan Young, originally from Hāwera here. In fact, I can attest to those amazing winds as a kid having to bike to school in a stiff southwesterly. You know what it's like. Look, I'm from Ariaki. Some of you know that I was for 12 years the MP for New Plymouth and was involved in the energy sector in my role in Parliament. But now I work for Ariaki, which is a Future Energy Development Agency. It's an independent, limited liability company, but it is funded by the government. And our job is to work in the transitional space for the energy sector and right through the whole country, and also we do a little bit of work internationally as well. I just thought I'd introduce us to you, so you know this is mostly New Plymouth based, but we do have people in Auckland and in Wellington as well. Now I'm pointing this in the right direction. Yeah. So here's our team. I'm head of policy, research and insights. We have a team there of 12 people, and we work extensively right in our region. We are very keen to support this initiative, this work, when it comes to offshore renewable energy, and particularly the wind sector. There's big opportunities for our region. And so that's fantastic. And so we are here to support the engagement and do whatever we can. As you know, we are based in these premises in New Plymouth. We have lots of, I guess, interactions and functions where we bring the energy sector together. Some of the work that we do, it's very difficult to kind of see this one, but in that energy innovation value chain, there is a lot of R&D that takes place in the country. Then there's what's called demonstration and commercialization, and then there's deployment in market. And that middle section of demonstration and commercialization is called by another name. It's called the Valley of Death when it comes to innovators getting ideas out of the lab into the field and then commercializing them. This is where we operate. We're working with mature innovation that's come out of often universities or industry, and what we do is put together opportunities for them to find their first customer, to get out there into the field. Often we'd run test pilots. We're doing a number in Taranaki itself and around the country as well. And these are all the different other government agencies that operate. And you can see right in that middle section where we live and dwell, we are there mostly by ourselves. So that's the function that we have, is to kind of build a bridge from R&D right through deployment into market. Some of the work that we do is around challenges. We have innovation, demonstration, and test beds, and we create and share new energy knowledge. That's what our team does. These are the projects we're currently working on, and we have 32 current live projects and 23 in the pipeline. That graphic on the side is a kind of artist's impression of the different projects we're doing around the country. So it's fascinating, it's really interesting, it's really essential, and we are very thrilled to support this korero, and thanks for the opportunity to be here. If any of you are in New Plymouth, want to come and visit us, connect with us, see how we can help you in a transition or look at opportunities, I'll have my business cards here as well, and please contact me. Thank you very much. Thanks, David.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, Giacomo. Okay, so the key thing we'll give a bit of a background first, but bear in mind the key thing we're really keen for you to do is to participate in the survey that should be in your inboxes when I finish speaking. If it's not there, come and tell us and we'll make sure you get a copy. What that survey you'll see as you go through is really trying to do is to help us to build up a better understanding of the capability that exists today. And just to kind of frame that a little bit further, and we'll talk about this more, we're not down to, this isn't a tender, this isn't, can you give us, 50 tonnes of galvanised steel and such and such. We're not at that level of detail, but we're trying to get enough into the detail to actually form a reasonable view, but without getting down to specific tender documents. Just for those who are not so familiar with the offshore wind story though, we thought we should just frame it a little bit at the start. And as Giacomo said, there's a lot of interest in offshore wind around the world, but particularly what's brought us here today is that interest that exists in New Zealand. It's actually an industry that's been around now for a bit over 30 years. It's still new, but it's not as perhaps new as some people think. Started in Denmark a bit over 30 years ago. It's growing very, very rapidly, and it is going to be a key to decarbonisation. And I mean, Giacomo again has already talked about this, but it's, just to kind of help give a bit of a sense of scale there, you can see that little graphic showing, what one of these, I think a 15 megawatt turbine that is, how it compares to Sky Tower or the stack at the New Plymouth Power Station. Very large, but remember, of course, actually quite hard to see if it's a long way offshore, unless you're underneath it. Really kind of a bit of old and a bit of new. Probably don't need to say much about this. The government is although we're really here today, we're not here for the government, but the New Zealand government is very aware of the potential that they're looking at what they need to do to actually make this potential a reality. Some of you may be involved in this. There was a document that was released a few months ago, and this is going to end up becoming an important part of the landscape going forward. But again, we can talk about that in the break if people are interested. To make this study real, we've based it around a real project. The particular project, not surprisingly, is the one that the sponsors of the study are looking at themselves, New Zealand Super and Copenhagen, which is a 1 1000 megawatt wind farm off Patia for stage one, and moving to 2 gigawatts in the second stage, with a commissioning date of around 2030. And once these sort of developments are built, in effect, we say 30 plus years there, in reality they're likely to be repowered, so you can think of it as being an ongoing industry. And one of the things I think many of you in the room will be very aware that to some extent these are almost like two industries. It's wind generation, but it's also marine services. Because it's offshore, there's a whole separate level of opportunity that comes from maintenance crews going out to do work on turbines very regularly. And for this study, we've come to the next slide. We've assumed that, in fact, that marine servicing is happening out of 2 different ports. One port near the wind farm itself, and because you want to minimise crew transfer times, people are coming and going, subject to weather every day or so. And so Patia is probably the prime contender for that, which obviously is, there's quite a redevelopment would be required at the port. And then there's periodic maintenance that's required on these turbines, roughly every 5 years or so, where you need a much larger vessel to be able to do the work, and that would probably be serviced out of Port Taranaki. Happy to take any questions. Just pause there for a moment. Okay. I will, at this point, I'll get Frank, I think, to just talk through the likely sort of time frames and, in a very high level sense, what are the sorts of opportunities, to give you a bit more of a feel for that, which I think will help us in terms of the sort of information we're looking to gather.
Thank you, David. So basically we have to think about the project in three separate bins. There's where we are right now, the development phase, which is probably something in the order of 3 to 5 years, and basically we're one or two into that already when it comes to thinking about the logistics studies, all the resource consent aspects, the CB rights, the various studies that are going to take part. Giacomo is already thinking about those and getting many of those framed up already. Shortly they will be delivering this little looks like a garden shed out on a pond. That's a environmental monitoring LiDAR that's going to sit out there to measure the currents of the wind speeds. They're basically the environment. That's going to sit 20 kilometres offshore in the middle of the field. Whereas it's somewhere en route now, somewhere in somewhere halfway here. That'll sit there for a number of years, or at least a year, to record valuable data to frame up how punishing the environment is going to be out there, and what the output of the wind farm will likely produce. So that work is obviously a vast amount of experts, subject matter experts dealing with various areas, which we'll touch on in a moment. Then we get into the construction phase, which will be a 3 to 4 year major exercise to lay out and erect not only the foundations but the wind turbines themselves. We've got to lay cables between a matrix or an array of cables among all the turbines to gather the output. This is all brought ashore. Then there's onshore substations. There's more lines. There's more lines, expansion and transpower works to connect all this to the grid. So there's a huge amount of work around the infrastructure, which will primarily the wind turbines and equipment will primarily be manufactured offshore and delivered from the original equipment manufacturer from at least the foundations up. But we'll talk about some of the opportunities around where the interfaces will be and how much we think might be local. And then we get into the long-term operation, day-to-day operations and maintenance, the usual things you could imagine from maintaining the power station, routine maintenance, keeping it operating, keeping communications, keeping it safe, getting staff to and from, it's a whole level of logistics to service 70 wind turbines versus one rig. We're talking about 70 different power stations that need to be visited once, maybe twice a year for routine maintenance. And then if they have a breakdown, we get staff there. Now they're going to be delivered by local vessels out of Pātea, or if the weather's really bad and it's emergency, helicopter delivered to the top. So it's just the sort of framing of the three major stages. If we just boil down the development phase into some of the studies that are going on, if you look at the ecology and environmental surveys, there's all the flora and fauna, the seabeds, the seabirds, fish, onshore species, you name it. There is all sort of manner of environmental studies that will take place. And then we talk about below the cultural impact, the human impact, the habitats on and offshore water quality, all the effects that will really needed to be assessed for the environmental impact study report, the AEE, assessment of environmental effects. Over on the other side, we start to think about how we're going to build this thing with the look at the geotechnical surveys, the subsea surveys, the various archaeological surveys, all manner of getting the technical footprint of the seabed, what's below the seabed, what's the seismic topology that is going to feed into firming up the design. And then we get into the engineering design itself, the wind farm design. There might be a standard product that's coming from the wind turbine from the manufacturer, but there'll be a lot of local content in the foundations. And then when you move further on, after you've got your consent together and your approval, you've got the O&M and the planning and how you're going to run the thing from day to day, how you're going to get there, what do you do when the weather's bad, how many people do you need. So we'll discuss that in the next bit. So just looking at the construction phase, obviously is the offshore component where you get the specialist vessels will come in from overseas with the blades and the turbine towers and the nacelles, so the piece at the top with the generator in it. They'll all be assembled basically offshore by specialist vessels heavy lift and or jack-up rigs. And then in addition to that, there's the vessels to lay cables on shore or cables between each wind turbine, and then lay those on the seabed, have protection from scouring, bring those ashore, and then when you get to the onshore, they've got this construction of the onshore substations, the transmission to the grid, the various developments of the port, whether it's at New Plymouth for the build and the long-term maintenance, or the local day-to-day maintenance at Apatia. There's an expansion of both of those ports, major development to make them serviceable and increase their availability in bad weather. There's more mundane aspects of the offices and the warehousing and all the logistics and facilities that have to go around maintaining an infrastructure that can look after the project. And then over the top of all that, there's the project management and logistics for getting everything here, getting everything in place, managing weather, managing people coming and going in a marine environment, and all the staff required to operate this thing in the long term and during construction. So we're particularly interested in the long-term aspects. And we've done a lot of work to look at overseas projects in this typical size as to how much staff we need, what sort of staff we need to run the daily O&M. So there's the operations, the 24/7 operations and monitoring, the offshore logistics of getting people to and from 20 kilometres. To get a good working day, we need 10 hours. It's going to take an hour to get there, 8-hour day, an hour back, and then a bit of contingency. It's a big exercise to get staff safely from shore to the vessels, offloaded and might not necessarily be swell conditions. Can't operate probably more than 2.5 metres swell, and that's not an uncommon situation off this coast. So there is various technologies to get staff safely from a vessel onto the wind turbine itself. And when you get to the onshore logistics, there's all the infrastructure for servicing those vessels, fueling them, and maintaining whatever vessels you're using. You've got to obviously, you're actually running a little shipping operation. And then there's the maintenance and services of the wind turbines themselves, the spare parts, getting those out to the vessel. Small things can be taken up on cranes. Larger things like generator swap outs are a bigger, slightly different, a much bigger exercise. It's like a 5-year refit of the generators, where you have jack-up rig, different story altogether. And then over and above that, there's all the service industries that go around the core staff, whether it be helicopter services, diesel maintenance on vessels, delivery of fuel, removal of waste, spare parts, consumables, people who come in to do coating specialists, scour protection, you name it. There's a vast array of diving services, for example. So we have tried to collate what's involved there, and this is the sort of basic org chart for the staff that would be running a 1 gigawatt station on a day-to-day basis. So we have an operations division which are running the thing 24/7, looking at the wind, dispatching it to the market. We have the marine coordination people that will be running the what's called CTV, which is crew transfer vessels, and the logistics and fueling of those, the health and safety of getting staff trained and on, because not only when you're on you've got a rather large ladder to climb, and there's a great step up in health and safety from working from onshore to offshore. If anybody works in the oil and gas industry will know. This is not just one platform. This is 70 different separate power stations scattered around many kilometres. So there's a bit of a time issue to get staff to and from, leading people on one turbine going to another, moving around, getting them by the end of the day, making sure they can get off if the weather changes. And then there's the onshore logistics of as we said, the planning, warehousing, port services, procurement, all the things that go with running a power station, and talking about maintenance of maintenance staff, the mechanical and electrical fitters that are going to be actually servicing the plant. and then there's the back office services that go with any organisation. So when you add all that up, we expect for about our 1 gigawatt base scenario that we have about 60 full-time equivalents, but on top of that, there's another 50 full-time equivalents supporting the entire industry, from helicopter services, air services, fueling, transport, connecting us to New Plymouth if we have warehousing somewhere else, specialist inspections, NDT specialists, divers, you name it. There's a vast number of job categories which I'm going to show you shortly, which are not directly employed, which will be contracted in. And then over and above that, there's the tier 3, which is the accommodation, the service providers, the bar, everybody needs a haircut, where they're going to stay, hospital, medical services, dentists. They're going to bring to the area another layer of additional services, which we call tier 3, the indirect services. Now, when you look at that 60 FTE, that's 2,000 man years for a 30-year project, plus another almost the same again for the tier 2 and 3. So this is not though the construction is a big spike, we're talking at the long-term 30-year plus job opportunity. Now, what we've been able to do is, with the benefit of knowledge from Copenhagen Offshore Partners Australian project, which they're developing at the moment, called Star of the South, off the coast of Victoria in the Tasman. They have already done a lot of the groundwork and developed job specs for all aspects of the project. So, though you can't see very clearly, they've developed job positions and specifications for the development phase in dark blue, or almost black, the dark blue construction phase, and then the O&M phase in light blue. So we've got a number of skills, and then we've got a job description and what's required for qualifications for each particular job, which we'll show you in more detail later on. The report will have all this thing. Now, do you want to go straight into the survey? Yeah. So we'll just park there for a minute, because we're going to talk about how we're going to try and gather information from you. We're going to put up a website which will show you what you'll see and how we'd like you to interact with that. Any questions on anything? Technology, prospects, timing? No?
So those jobs, that list of, is that accessible to us to look at those jobs and the list?
We're going to
put that up,
yeah. So yes. Well,
I mean, if people ask the question of us, what jobs are there? Obviously, that list effectively is the answer to that, isn't it?
Yeah.
Details.
Yeah.
So are we going to publish that in the? How does it get?
I think what we would do for now, as Frank said, that list has been largely developed for like the sister project that's a bit ahead in Victoria, so we can certainly point you to that, and I think the jobs are very similar. There might be some, you'll see the qualifications are all Australian qualifications, ignore those, we're doing a New Zealand version, but it'll give you a very good idea on the jobs. I think that's probably the best approach.
The guide is available on the Star of the South
yeah.
website. So we can share the link to that.
Yeah. In fact, one of the things I think on the survey website is if you want further information, and I think we can add that as a link to provide further. I can't remember whether it's there at the moment. I don't think it is, it, Rachel? We've got other things.
It's not the jobs.
No. Yeah. Okay.
So when you open up the survey, I'm going to actually bring it up online so we can flip. So what I'm going to do is when you open up the survey, you'll see a page like this, and it will present a number of job categories, which I'll show you in a moment. And then it asks you whether you, if that's something you're interested in, then we're trying to ascertain how ready you are. If you're there's a bit of a readiness scale over here. If you're limited readiness, some experience in other sectors, but significant preparation is required. You might need a new plant, bigger premises, and then you got for moderately ready, like you have a relevant experience, but you might need to do retraining. So you're in the area, but you're not specifically focused on this particular technology, but you'll do some more retraining. The scale of how ready the various parties are, and then what phase of the business you'd be interested in. And you can tick all of these, or the readiness one is a one of, but the development, construction, or operational phase, we want to know what sort of phase you'd be interested in. And I'm just going to go to a backup slide to show you. So there's about 350 different jobs or elements in the start of South. We've boiled these down to about 40 major categories. So if you're interested in, you see the first one that came up was air services. But if you're interested in fire protection, you know, if you're into fire protection, fire detection, you know, fire extinguishers, whatever, you can tick that box and you can explain a bit more what your business is all about. If you're a supplier or you're a service provider or you're a maintainer, if you're into training, what sort of training are you into? And so these are the categories you'll be asked. You can flick through and find where you live in this matrix. And even though we can't get every job that could possibly be there, you can use your imagination. If you sort of fit into that box, explain what you do, and you can attach some documents that you have your company capability document, and electronically you can attach that as well. And we'll gather all your data. So what might be the best thing is to actually just go to the page of the website. I'm going to entertain them with a few gags while I get the...
I've got to entertain you with a few gags. Maybe we'll go to questions while Frank's getting the site up. I see if one or two of you actually checked your emails. I'm hoping that you actually found something there. Yep, good.
And just, it did mention on there that there's some useful links on that slide. The links are also in the email, so you can check those.
I've got a question.
So how do you, if you were to talk to a local and you go through that list, someone who's been here a while, has an understanding, will go, yeah, you know, there's this company, this company, this company. How are you, this is a very small subset, obviously, of the industries and businesses that are out there. How have you identified, who are you working with to identify those?
Yeah, have we? Well, in terms of, if you know of someone who you think should be, you know, sending a response in, forward on the email you've just got. So the more we can get, the happier we'll be. We've worked with local Chamber of Commerce, we've worked with various other business organisations. We work with iwi to try and figure out who might be interested and push this information out to them.
Could I suggest, like the Hāwera Star,
Yep.
you could have that list and just say there's a survey here. We want to know all the people, because a lot of people, yeah, that could be a good way.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mentioned, I've sent the email through for this event to a few people who didn't know it was
Right,
on, for example,
Right. Yep.
and they're in the fabrication and so forth. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, that's a good suggestion. We should, after this, I assume the Hāwera Star's not here. We'll make contact with them. There's no, I mean, we're keen to get the information the next week or so, but there's certainly, if you weren't here today, there's no reason you miss out. We're very much keen to build up as good a picture as we can of capability and interest. Yeah. So thank you for that suggestion. If there's anyone else you think we should be, I heard the question from over the other side.
During the offshore construction phase, how many people are you expecting to be offshore at any one time? What peaks are there going to be by getting bodies out there in a helicopter limited to 10 or 12? Naturally, in a boat you can get more, but through that phase, what sort of POV are you expecting out there?
I might defer to Giacomo on this.
So, as David was saying, this was mainly focused on the operations and maintenance just because it's that more longer term jobs. For the construction phase, it's kind of similar to oil and gas operations, where you get, we wouldn't be helicoptering many people. It would be more like them leaving Port Taranaki from, with an installation vessel. The numbers that get thrown around are thousands of people required for those 2 or 3 years of construction, but we really wanted to focus more on the operations and maintenance phase, just because it's that sort of longer term jobs. And the reality with the construction ones is that, you know, there's very few companies in the world who can do this kind of thing. And even if we're the clients, we only have a certain amount of influence on who they use. So it might be that a lot of that personnel comes from overseas. So there is a piece that we can do there, certainly, to try and, you know, train the people here to work on those jobs. But we really see the real sort of power in the operations and maintenance phase. But in terms of how many people would be out there, you can think similar to oil and gas. You know, whenever a vessel goes out to do well drilling or stuff like that, it's that kind of large spread of many different activities that need to happen at the same time to support one big activity. So, you know, the installation of one of those turbines, the installation of the foundation could be 2 or 3 days, and then the installation of the tower and turbine on top could be another, say, 4 or 5. So all of a sudden you have kind of more than a week dedicated to just one installation. And in all that time you have environmental monitoring that has to happen alongside all the people who actually drive the monopile into the ground and all that. So it becomes quite a big operation. Plus all the people back at the port who are preparing all the materials for the next shipment. Normally there's, say, 4 turbines that go out at any one time, and there will be people back at Port Taranaki preparing the next 4 and all that. So it becomes quite extensive. But yeah, I personally don't like to throw around numbers that haven't been really thought of. So that's why, yeah, we wanted to do this with a bit more detail, but focused on the operations and maintenance. Construction will probably be a future piece of work for Consul.
Thanks for the question. I think the other thing, just to add to what you said, although a lot of the offshore stuff is very specialised, there is also the onshore elements. And the port development, both, you know, to local, you know, say Patia, and probably expansion potentially at New Plymouth. So, but again, we haven't tried to quantify the numbers on those, but I think we will identify them as qualitative and there's potential further work.
Yeah, that's a very, very good point. You know, here we're focusing on building the offshore wind farm. The reality is that there's a lot of work that will happen. We will have to basically upgrade the grid transmission grid network quite a bit to get 1 gigawatt out of South Taranaki. So, you know, that's something that Transpower, as the owners of the grid, would be managing. We would, I guess, be the initiators of that because we need it. But that's an example of another huge infrastructure project that has to happen because of something like this. Port Taranaki or Patia upgrades, well, Patia would basically be building a harbour from scratch almost. So yeah, there's a lot of other work that is not necessarily captured by this study. We had to kind of put a border on the study at some point. But you know, the idea is in the future to keep investigating things that are useful. So it's good for us to hear these questions because we realize that, okay, this is something that needs to be investigated and we can give it a shot, I guess. Thanks.
Hopefully that.
This is the live website, so it's pretty straightforward. I'm going to try and steer it from here, but so of all those 40 odd categories, we've had to bundle things together. So I just look at, I mean, civil works is a huge subject all by itself. So if you're involved in anything to do with moving dirt, building roads, trains, whatever, any civil, if you're a civil contractor, then, you know, we were like, you would, you know, take that you're fully, for example, you might be fully ready now, and then and you're interested in, you know, basically you're interested in construction and operations, and then there's another. Then we go on, and each category there's another. And if you do corrosion protection, same question, same drop down question for every category, and all categories are just laid out in these various pages. Well, at the end of the day, you'll get eventually to the end of the survey, and then we'll ask you for your information, your contact information, and whether you're happy that we share that. So if by the way, if we have forgotten, there's another category. So we'll ask you, you know, where are you based? What type of organisation are you? Professional services? Do you manufacture things? Do you build things? Do you maintain things? And if you hit other, you'll get another list of questions about tell us what you do that you think would be relevant to this particular project. How big are you? And how long you've been in business? And then sort of an opportunity to tell us you can attach anything you like if you've got some capability documents, and then you can fill out your details, and then we ask you if you don't mind sharing that information. If you want to be anonymous, you can tick, well, we won't put your company name up in the report, we'll just gather the data that there is X civil contractors that are capable of this, that and the other thing. And likewise, you know, you're happy that this data is shared with the sponsors. And then we'll ask if you're a robot. And that's about it. It's as simple as that. And we invite you to get that. We would like you to get through that in the next couple of days, or maybe the next week or so. And yes.
Why the hurry of a week? Because the local community here.
Just we want to draw this thing to a close, but it can be.
Because I mean, this is of importance to the local community, and to feel like we've had time, as I say, you know, I'm sure there's a lot of people who would like to submit this questionnaire or, you know, respond, and that gives us the opportunity, all of us have connections in the community, to get out, you know, perhaps a month, and then...
Yeah, no, that's quite reasonable. I don't see any problem with that. And we don't have a hard time frame in particular. We actually want the answer.
Not at all. The idea of forums like this is that you then reach out. We don't by any chance.
No,
we don't expect to have covered the whole of the
No, we probably we'd love it.
I'm ambitious for a week, but a month's fine.
Yeah, I mean, we want the right answer, right? We want as much information spread as widely as possible, and if you can push that out to other networks.
Just a clarification, when you said you're ready, if people were ready, that would assume you don't want surplus capital equipment hanging around. So effectively, if you're utilising your equipment, I don't know, you know, it seems a bit of an odd question. If you're fully ready, can you clarify what you mean by that? Because that means they're sitting around with redundant capacity, you know?
Yeah, we've got to break it into three bins about how ready, you know, there's are you ready to go right now, and would you have to modify your business or buy a new plant to do this work, right? So it's just it's a very rough scale, but there's an opportunity to sort of provide some commentary in there.
Okay.
So if you're an IT provider, you would probably be ready to install CCTV cameras, security gates right now. If you were someone that wanted to move your business from what you do now from being a mechanic, being a service provider that only works on shore, but you're a mechanical service provider, but you don't have the skills or training you would need to train your staff to work offshore, then you know that you're not quite ready yet, but you could readily be ready. And if you're not even in this business, but you need to buy new premises, retool, and you know, then you're not. You can just it is three broad categories, and that's the best we can come up with to try and sort of come up with a spread.
What you've described 70 different power stations out offshore.
Yeah.
When they come and get installed, what's left to do that could be local content? And the reason why I ask that is you just mentioned CCTV cameras. If I think about ladders to climb up the side, nuts and bolts to screw the thing together, is there an element of local content that can be brought to bear to help construct these things?
Well, I think you might be better to explain, but there's no hard cut-off right now. We haven't ordered the thing. So you can imagine that the foundations that go in the soil, well, you know, the seabed, that could be local construction. Then you get to there's access ladders, and there's ropes, and there's harnesses, and there's lifting gear, and there's lighting, and there's navigational lighting. Now there's no clear cut as to what could be provided locally, but for sure the cell that's coming from Europe is already plug and play, ready to go. That's going to turn up, but there's an array of items that we want to gather. If your business is navigational lights, I mean these things, basically there are navigational hazards sitting out there. They've got all sorts of array of equipment to be found, so they can be found and identified, and you know which turbine you're on. So there's other bits that get bolted around it that are not necessarily cut on the turbine. You have a more definite break point.
No, I think that covers it. I mean, there are some components that will not be manufactured in New Zealand, like the monopiles, 2,000 tons, 110 meters long, 12-meter diameter steel pipe. Yeah, nobody can roll that here. But as Frank says, so those access ladders. I visited the yard of Dialogue Fitzroy a couple of years ago. They can do that. They can do probably 70 of that. So, at this stage, we're again years away from actually building, we have the luxury to be able to set up the understanding of, could we actually do that in New Zealand? Would it be, cost effective and all that? And we're definitely it's definitely something that we want to explore quite a bit. So again, it's all part of our understanding what can be done here realistically, and then focusing on that, trying to foster that and avoiding the things that cannot happen in New Zealand or in many other countries, to be honest. On our project in Australia, Australia pretty big, but even there, we're not expecting to be able to build our own blades there, because it's a very specific industry. Yes?
So again, you were talking about capital, and you were talking about sort of the operational and maintenance side of things. So this survey is both potentially the capital items as well as the operational.
Whole
Yep.
life cycle.
So if we're not experts necessarily at the moment by building special widgets for the capital components, but we could be in Taranaki, but we don't know what we don't know.
Yep.
So how can someone answer that if I have a special flanges that I'm going to make here
Yeah.
for all 70?
The idea is this is definitely not the end of this conversation. This is the beginning of this conversation. We're starting to talk about offshore wind jobs. There's 4 fancy email addresses down there where we're expecting people to reach out to me or to David and tell us exactly what you said, Karen. So, this looks like an interesting opportunity for this company. There needs to be a lot of work to do to bring them up to speed with that, to understand if it's an investment opportunity for them, and then we discuss it. So, there's going to be many years of discussions on how this should happen. But we're very happy to hear suggestions on how it should happen. And that's why we're having the first of the workshops in South Taranaki, because I think that you guys understand what you can do a lot better than we can from web searches and stuff. So it's not the end at all. It's just the beginning.
I think the other thing I'd add is in the email that you've got, thanks, Giacomo. In the email that you've received, there are a couple, and I think we'll add one more. We'll add the Star of the South's jobs guide to it. Some links to some useful information there. So it's a very good question. I mean, for some people, they can probably tell me today what they can do, and helicopter transfers. It's probably answer that. But the special widget, I don't know what you need. Those links will tell you a lot more about the types of things that offshore wind has and requires. Won't answer every question, and as Giacomo says, feel free to email us. But
I suppose the reason I say I listened to the GWIC podcast, right? So, and the last one in March was about a supplier sort of down the chain, if you like, not the big components, but the small sort of widgets that we're talking about.
yeah,
and it was a 3D printing of some metal for a kind of widget for the bottom attachment. So if we know as a community what the latest technology is, and we're talking to those people, and these people are coming to South Taranaki, and we might stand up and go, yeah, we've got the capability, we can train people, and maybe look at some funding for a factory or whatever, but we don't know what we don't know. So we can't say we're ready, because we don't know, So just having those, as you said, the conversations go on, but it would be nice to have the people who are advancing the widget making technology for us to say, hey, yeah, that's something that can be done in South Taranaki.
In the next years, there will be a lot of community hall talks about what offshore wind is, and showing all the we didn't have, we don't have a presentation here about what offshore wind structures look like and all the possible widgets, but that's certainly something that will be discussed more and more going ahead.
That's cool.
So it just wasn't part of this study, but I see your point, Karen. It makes sense.
But we haven't got a technology partner as such. You haven't picked the turbine
Oh no,
to
not at all.
purchase. You don't know exactly what's coming.
No, agreed, but it's just that when we're ticking the box to say the community's ready, and we're ready for innovative new products that come on the market to make these particular widgets, capital items.
To be honest, there's also a big component that isn't necessarily explored here, which is New Zealand doesn't have a lot of heavy industry to compete with this, but New Zealand has a lot of really clever brains that do things like software, algorithms, and all that stuff is becoming way more important in Europe in maintaining these offshore wind farms. So that's an entire separate conversation that I think will happen more and more, where we start looking at what soft skills are actually existing in New Zealand that could start, providing material to the wider global offshore wind industry. Yeah, as I said, just the beginning of a long journey of talking about these things.
Just make one more comment on that, and that is that I think part of it is also we need to recognise it's an industry that's still changing. It's going through a very rapid evolution. So what you build today isn't what you build in 5 years' time. So I think, again, this is the importance of the conversation, but just understanding that there are firms here, for example, that are interested in, fabrication of, or corrosion protection or whatever. That's a starting point that helps us to have a bit more of a conversation, whereas if no one's saying they're interested or capable in that space, then that also tells us something. So we won't be able to boil the ocean in one go, but we'll get there if we start to piece it together. I'm mixing my metaphors, which probably tells me it's nearly time for refreshment.
So if we've got no more, are we all happy? Do you have something to add here? The final
admin thing. If you haven't got the email with the survey in it, then come and let me know and we can add your email address. It will have gone to the email that you registered for this workshop with, so generally that's just one email address for each company or organisation, but we're happy to send it to more people and more than happy for you to forward it on to anyone that you think will be interested.
Yeah, no, as Rachel says, very, very happy for you to forward it on. And we haven't got a prize or anything, but we'll certainly be very appreciative. I think we've got refreshments next door, haven't we? Yeah. So unless there are any other questions, but you can also ask us next door. Probably the only thing I need to do then is just thank you all for coming along today. We need to go and get in contact with the Hāwera Star.
It was just one of
No, it's a good. No, I think it's an excellent suggestion. So, if there's anyone else you think we should talk to, do sing out. We really appreciate the ideas and the feedback. So, thank you very much.